Should you lift heavy? It's a confusing topic, and it's one we're going to discuss today in the She Runs Strong podcast with me, Nikki Friedman, and my colleague Shona Hendricks. So, hello, Shona. What are we talking about today, and how are you?
I'm good, Nikki. Thanks so much. Today, I think the question is no longer. Well, I hope that the question is no longer should you be doing strength training or not. I think if you listen to the She Run Strong podcast, I hope that message has got in. But I think it's more about what type of strength training you should be doing. And females over 40 are just, for me, bombarded with everything, right? So I mean, if you listen to anything Stacey Sims says, she says you have to lift heavy. I know Dr. Mary Claire Haver speaks around how you have to have a weighted vest. I think the old school way of thinking, you had your two 2 kg dumbbells, which,
Yeah.
just so really, I think that the goal of what we were hoping to achieve today is what should females over 40 who are runners specifically, what type of strength should we be doing? What's useful? I don't know what your
I
experience with
mean,
that,
I couldn't
Nikki.
agree more. As a 55-year-old and someone who dabbles in Instagram and Facebook, it's just there all the time when I scroll on. You can just, it's coming up in all these reels. Stacey Sims really hitting it hard with lifting heavy, and everybody kind of just really going on about the only 3 strength sessions to do, or the only 2 compound lifts to do, or you have to lift this heavy, or you have to do this, and then you get the Pilates and stuff. And I have to say, as someone in the trade as well, who's been a run coach now for a long time, I find it confusing. And I find it, and there's times that I find myself getting swayed by, oh, maybe I should do this, or oh, maybe I should do that. So I think this is a really interesting topic. And I think, it is unique to the athlete as well, definitely, in the stage you're at. But I think, this will be a really interesting one to get into and stuff. So I'm
Yes.
interested to see, what you have to say, and let's dig into this a little bit more. So shall we start with the basics maybe and dig into that?
Yeah, I think the thing is what type of strength training. I think we need to realize that there's an entire umbrella of strength work, right? So I mean, and that is including everything that we've been talking about. So resistance training and Pilates and all of those things. But I think if we really want to understand what is important to a female over 40 who's a runner, we need to really just be focusing on specific things. And I think 2 things would come into play there, Nikki. And I think one is health, right? So if we're talking around menopause and ensuring that we are fit and healthy and longevity for the future, so bone mass and or bone health and lean muscle mass, and then obviously we're talking running. And so from running perspective, we're looking at injury prevention, we're looking at performance. We want to make sure that we are balancing both of those. And really the key thing with this is for both of those to answer both health and or longevity and performance. It comes down to resistance training. And I know we'll talk about what is resistance training for a lot in the podcast, but for me, we need to, if we understand why we're doing something, so if we understand the reason as to why, then it really gives a bit of a more buy-in as to the answer as to why, so, or as to what it is, really. But for me to hit both of those 2 aspects, it needs to be a form of resistance training.
So, and what do you mean by resistance training? You're saying resistance. What are we meaning by
Yeah.
resistance?
Again, because it covers whatever. In the introduction, we said, Stacey Sims says this, Dr. Haver says, so Dr. Stacey Sims says lift heavy, and Dr. Haver says a weighted vest. Both of those things sound like resistance, and they are, right? So neither of
Yeah.
them are in particularly wrong, if I can put it that way. I mean, I'm not a massive fan. If you listen to us, we know our views on the weighted vest idea, etc., etc. So it's pushing your body against a form of resistance, right? So if you're holding a dumbbell and you lift it up as a bicep curl, that is resistance training, okay?
Okay.
But if you go and stand against the wall and push against the wall as hard as possible, that's still resistance training. It's just a different type of resistance training. And so we really just need to really figure out what is specific to females, for menopause, for bone health and muscle mass, and for runners. And so let me just give some basic examples of those. So body weights, squats, are essentially resistance training because you are working your own body weight against gravity, right?
Yes.
Push-ups are a form of resistance training. And of course, and we'll talk about this more as we go through here, but we want to get progression, so once you can do 10 bodyweight squats without feeling like you're going to die, we then want to make sure that we can progress those up. And I think that's quite important as well, is that there's that progression aspect, but we need to be pushing our body against that form of resistance. So if it starts with body weights and we then progress that to bands, maybe some lighter weights, and then progressing that into perhaps heavier weights later on, I think all of those are really, really important. Nikki, you mentioned your experience, and you've coached, you've trained, you've also dabbled within strength. I mean, for you, what are some of the things that you've done through your 40s and into your 50s from a strength perspective? What are some of the aspects that you've worked on?
Oh, do you know I have a long past with strength training actually? When I first had my kids, and so that would be mid-30s, I really started doing a lot more strength training in the gym with a personal trainer. And I was that reluctant person who came in 5 minutes late. Do we have to do this today? And he would give me weights, and I just didn't get it. I didn't get what I was doing, but I'm glad I did it because I now really know the benefit. I was always a runner, so I did it alongside. And then some point in my 40s, I stopped doing it for a little bit, for a couple of years, and then went back to much more heavy lifting. And that's when I really found the benefit. So I came to that probably with perimenopausal stage, not realizing maybe that I was perimenopausal, but started lifting heavier and just
Okay.
started to really enjoy it as well, and lifted with a trainer again, which I think is a really key thing. And at that point, I really learned the movement patterns of how and what I was doing, and that really, really helped. At the same time, I also did yoga as well, and I did a sort of flow yoga. So I was doing flow yoga and heavy lifting. I think I must have been injured. I'm pretty sure that's probably why I was injured. And this is often, and I think this is key, this is often why or how runners get into a gym, because they've started running, they get injured, and like me, they sort of dabble with other stuff in a
Yes.
desperate attempt to get back to running again. And this is exactly the sort of stuff that I was doing. And albeit I was coaching as well. And I started just lifting these sort of heavy weights and just really, really enjoying it. But then the yoga I also find really good as well, which is interesting. And I find that actually some of the yoga flow classes would be quite hard work in themselves, but I guess not in the same way as the really lifting heavy, which would align with Stacey Sims' sort of view. It was really hard though, lifting heavy. And that's the only thing I'd say as an older lady. I find lifting heavy hard, like much harder than running, and much it hugely fatiguing as well. So I find it difficult just knowing the right level to come in on, and just knowing exactly where to start. And so I don't know how you would guide with something like that, but I had a trainer and I still found it quite hard and quite heavy and was massively fatiguing. And for the next 2 days, I'd almost find it difficult to run or do anything else because it was so difficult. Whereas yoga actually was softer, so I could then run the next day and then do more yoga and that sort of stuff. So
Yes.
I think it's interesting to know where to start. So where
Yeah.
would you start on something like this if you haven't?
I mean, let me. There's two parts that I want to answer that in, because I think you're so right, and I think this is why people also hate strength training, right, or resistance training, however we want to say it, because they start and they probably do too much, and then they stiff for not just 2 days. They've got proper DOMS, delayed onset of muscle soreness, and so they stiff and sore for a week, and it takes away from running, and then they hate it, and then they never go back,
Yeah,
right? And so I
yeah.
think it's a key. It's a key question, and so how you structure your week, firstly, is really, really important. So let me just go back to
Mm,
what we want to do. We want to do health. So we want to build lean muscle. We want to look after our bones, but we also want to have good performance, and we want to stay injury free for running. Okay, so those two aspects. So how you structure your week would, as an example, what I would recommend is that on a Monday, you do a lighter session. So that is where a yoga is really, really helpful, is that you do a lighter session that focuses on stabilizers, on movement, on really just, not necessarily the bigger muscle groups. That would then, be followed with your with like your higher intensity session, so your intervals or something like that, because then you're not doing those intervals on very tired legs. You're doing them on because you've been working on the stabilizers of
Right.
things.
Yes.
Then let's say on the Wednesday, you could then do your heavier strength session. And again, I know, I hope we haven't people haven't turned off this podcast already when we're talking around lifting heavy. I'll give you those progressions and what we recommend now. But that would then be your heavier session is on a Wednesday, because then inevitably on a Thursday, you're doing an easier run day, right? And I don't mind that you do an easy run on slightly tired legs. Of course, we don't want that being absolutely exhausted legs, but slightly tired legs, because as you start slower, you'll loosen up and warm up as we're going through. And then, of course, you've got your longer runs on the weekend, just from a time perspective, right? And so that's 2 sessions. Of course, if we want to really get somewhere, we want to do 3, but that's how I would structure the week. And we've had people in our Coach Parry platform turn around and say to us, your strength sessions are too easy. We're struggling like with that. And my response is always that in this phase, yes, we want to get health, we want to get bone health and build lean muscle, but we want our strength to complement our running. It shouldn't take away from your running. It needs to be something that helps you run, not takes away from your running. And so I think that's how I would structure the week, so you're not feeling shattered all the time. But from a progression question, which I think you asked, which is so important, is don't start lifting heavy. don't start with that. You pick some exercises that are good exercises for building lean muscle, for looking after your bones, for running, and then start those with body weight, and then within 6 weeks you can continue with body weight. That doesn't mean, that we can adapt the sets and the reps, we can adapt, certain things, and you can manipulate so many things. But if you start by doing squats with a 20 kilogram bar or 20 kg kettlebell or whatever, you are going to be stiff. So I would recommend start with body weight, and then within 8 to 12 weeks, that's when we can relook at things. That's when we can perhaps start loading. And don't load with 20 kgs, load with 5 kgs, like very, very, very small adaptations from there, because especially if you haven't done anything before. And the last thing I want to say on that, sorry, I know I'm carrying on here, is just there's so many things you can do, and we'll dive into this a little bit later. I want to speak around what exercises to do, and I'll give you my sort of play on how. So what is a squat? A squat's a squat. We'll do that a little bit later. Some examples.
Yeah, I mean, I think with hindsight, looking back, I didn't almost have like the strength endurance to be doing heavy lifting, and that would have been quite good. And then I did progress on from that to finding some classes locally to me that were only 30 minutes long, and I suddenly sort of found those so much easier, because they were full body, but they were just 30 minutes and they would just hit all the targets, but I wouldn't be completely wiped. And so I probably did it the wrong way around with hindsight there. But I did it, and it's all good experience one way or another. So that was good. So we've kind of explained about resistance training. So so you quite like yoga and Pilates on a Monday then? That's okay to do for an injury prevention mobility. And that does or doesn't count as a strength session then? I wasn't quite.
So yeah, it's one of those things. I think that where you do your yoga, where you do your Pilates is also in question. But let's say all yoga and Pilates are created. If you enjoy yoga and Pilates, I want you to do it still, because it's going to get you to go to do strength, right? That's going to be better than nothing. I don't always think that yoga and Pilates works in all the exact small muscles that we need for running, but again, it's better than nothing. So if you enjoy that, yes, do a yoga or Pilates session on a Monday as an example, so that you're not going into your interval run with very tired legs. Yeah, so I do like it. Again, it forms under this umbrella of strength training, and I love yoga. I really, really love yoga. Not a massive Pilates fan for running, just because I don't think it's absolutely dynamic.
Classic.
You lie on your back,
Well, it's
yeah.
very focused, and I mean, so I have moved down from Scotland to outside London, and the town I'm in has, I can't tell you how many Pilates studios. They're everywhere. I feel like that's all the women do around here, and it's either a floor work or reformer Pilates, which I do think they can do quite a lot
Yeah.
of strength on that. I've only done,
yeah,
and it's big. I mean, it's, you can never get into a class. They're always fully booked, and
yes.
it's,
But yeah, sorry, but I think the thing is that they're full. That's great, but I don't think they suffice. I think they're great from a running injury prevention aspect. Yes, I think it'll definitely help, and I think it's better than nothing. But maybe the Pilates reformer, we can take that as a bit of an outlier in terms of the Pilates yoga thing. But they don't generally allow for the increase of lean muscle mass that we're looking for from 40 onwards. Well, actually from 30 onwards, ideally. But
which is your health benefit, really,
which is
which
your health
you want
benefit.
to do always, aside from running, don't you? So,
yeah.
So,
I think maybe I just didn't explain that correctly as to why that is, right? Because then people are like, oh, but why? Like, and so in order for us to really look after our bones, we have to load the bones. The bones respond to force on them. That's how they actually make themselves stronger. And that's why resistance training works. And of course, running contributes to that, because we are loading the bones from stepping, over and over again. But it's linear, right? We're running in a straight line, we're right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. So, we need to have that multi-directional force on the bones to really look after the bones. And the same thing with lean muscle mass and building that. Again, we know that we're losing lean muscle, and if we work the muscles and we really are training them, they break down. There's little tears, and then they make themselves stronger. And so if you're just doing the same thing over and over, and if you're lying on a floor utilizing your core in Pilates, again, no hate on Pilates at all. I think there is a use for it, but it's not going to build the lean muscle that we are losing around our entire bodies. So I just wanted to make that quite clear, that I love these forms of strength training. I just think they're not enough for what we need for females as we're getting older, to complement everything necessarily.
And of course, we did talk about that in an episode just recently, about how you had been doing some run training and some strength and had lost a little bit of lean. So it's quite easily done, really. So we definitely, as runners, want to make sure that we are at least holding on, if not building a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
so right. So what should we be doing then? So we were sort of roughly talking about it, an injury prevention, a loading one. How should we, shall we break this up into, if you've never done strength before, how you would start? Or and
that's
do you need some bands and stuff, or would you just start with a very basic sort of some squats and press ups? What would you do to start with?
Yeah, I think a key thing of what I like all my resistance or strength training plans to. So before I was focusing on running coaching, I was working as a strength and conditioning coach at the High Performance Center here in South Africa with our Olympians, and our female footballers was really my aspect that I was working with. And so even in those plans, I have a general principle of what I like to see in a plan. So I love squats. I think squats are functional. I hate the word functional, but are useful for every sport, every human, every aspect.
So let's break down a squat a little bit, just for, what is good about a squat? What does it work on?
Well, it's really focusing on glutes and stabilizers, quads, hamstrings, and a little bit of the lower limb, right? And yeah, all running, absolutely. And if you can't squat properly, it highlights aspects of immobility. And so when you can start getting mobility right, especially ankle mobility and hip mobility, you'll find your squats improve. Then it's a bit of a win-win. We're improving our mobility with our squats, and our squats are improving because of our mobility. So And again, there's so many layers here. So squats, but then what kind of squats? Like, so Bulgarian squats, single leg squats, so those are all little derivatives, but just on a high level aspects, every single one of my training plans will have a squat movement. It'll have a hip hinge movement. So a hip hinge movement is like a straight leg deadlift. If you are standing with your legs generally straight, not locked, sort of bend, push the bum back, bend at the hip, and the upper body comes over into that movement. So that is good because that works your posterior chain. So that's working your back muscles, your glutes, your hamstrings, everything on the back, everything on the posterior chain.
Again, fundamental to running. So we love that one. Okay.
Absolutely. And then I always have a push and a pull exercise in my plans. So an upper body push and an upper body pull within the exercise. So a push up, a bench press, and then from a pull perspective, a row, a bent over row, an upright row. So there's some aspects of push and pull for upper body as well as it does help lower body.
So that's working around the shoulders and the chest and the back, which of course you need because you're using your arms for running. So we like that too.
Yes. Good. And of course, if we working on our bone density, we want that in the upper body because risk of falls, landing on wrists, fractures, etc. So that's also important.
I heard somewhere a stat about that, relatively speaking, compared to men, we have quite a lot of strength in our lower body. The sort of percentage, I can't remember what it was now. I thought it was sort of 70-80% of what guys have. But in our upper body, we were more like 50%. That, guys are just that much more stronger naturally in their upper body compared to us. We are just, and you see it a lot with females, like, can you do a press up? Most females can't, but most guys can, this sort of thing. And so Absolutely. I think it's actually really interesting to not neglect that upper body.
You're spot on. I think that is just because of the overall muscle mass or, literal amount of muscle around that area. I don't know why, but I do know why, and this is the reason why, but I've been doing lateral raises in the gym for a while now, and I love them.
Really?
I hate them I hate them because I can't increase my weight on these stupid lateral raises.
They're hard.
They're really, really hard. But if you think about your deltoid, it's a muscle. It's not a very, very big muscle in comparison to your quad or your hamstring. So, so that's just to reiterate what you were saying there. But then the last thing that I need to incorporate in this is any kind of aspects of stabilizer or core. And I think people get confused when you're talking core. When you say core, we're not talking abdominals, right? I'm not talking sit-ups. Your core, if you think of this as your spine, your core is essentially all of the muscles that surround the spine. So it's your entire trunk, right? And so we want to make sure that we're incorporating exercises for that, which of course, that is important for running. But more than that, all 4 of those other exercises that we do, you should be working your core in all of those exercises.
Yes.
Which is why I have an issue with people lying on the floor doing an exercise, because you're not utilizing your core to stabilize you while you are doing a single leg squat or a deadlift or a suitcase squat, or so that's why they all kind of tie in. But every single one of my plans would start with an element of one of those, an exercise of one of those sort of categories, if that makes sense.
So that was 5. Was that 5 or 6 you had there?
So a squat, a hip hinge, a push and a pull, and stabilizers or core.
So there's not that many really. It's very doable. Yeah.
Yes, of course. And you can, but of course you can then, how we venture into this is the world's really your oyster, so then you could have a set of exercises that does the core and the hip hinge, and then you could do that again in your plan. But starting off, that's what I would recommend. You can pick those 5 exercises, and let's do that. We can do a basic squat, body weight squat, a hip hinge movement. So literally just feet shoulder width apart, push your bum back as if you almost want to tap the wall behind you, and then bring that upper body over with straight shoulders. Okay, so just do that. Just holding your broomstick on your shoulders as an example. A push up as your push exercise, a row as your pulling exercise, and then some aspects of core. There we go. Plan made. And how we venture from there is obviously taking us further into the specifics. Yeah.
So I guess if you're not looking to go to a gym, a bit intimidated, that's a good place to start. Although maybe get someone checking your technique. So how important is technique then? It's going to be quite
Yeah.
important with these, isn't it?
If you want to recover from sessions faster, not feel tired all the time, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join me in my upcoming training specifically for female runners over the age of 45. In it, I'll share with you my simple 5-step framework that'll transform your running. Simply scan the QR code on screen now or click on the link in the description to save your seats in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there. It's absolutely important for 2 reasons. One, from an injury risk perspective, right? So if you, much like running, think about running. If we are running right foot, left foot for 42 kilometers, that's 42,000 steps. And that constant repetition is what can cause injuries. And so if you are doing a squat over and over and over again with the wrong technique, you could essentially be putting yourself at risk of injury. So we want to make sure that we're doing them with the right technique from an injury prevention perspective. But 2, because if you're not doing the right technique, you're just not utilizing the right muscles. And the body is so clever, and the body's a chain. If something is wrong somewhere else, the bigger muscles are just going to take over. And so we see that all the time with our Coach Parry members, because we're so specific about do this, breathe in here, pull the ribs down to the hips, dig the heels into the ground, and you feel the muscles work in different ways. And so not all squats are necessarily created equal then if you're not doing them with the right technique. You're not going to get the benefit out of that exercise as you would if you're not using the right technique.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I had just joined this local gym and it is a CrossFit gym. I'm going to put my hands up. I'm not a big fan of CrossFit, but I quite like the feel of this gym. And they had what was kind of classed as a fresh start program for 2 months. And I have just been a bit under the weather for the last few months. So I wanted to kind of come back quite gently. So I thought this might be quite good. Talked my brother into coming with me, who's never done strength. Said, I'll help you, come along, let's go. And so it was 2 months of this sort of workout sessions. Oh my goodness. They just launched straight into the CrossFit way. I'm sorry if there's any CrossFitters listening to this. And I know it's some people absolutely love it, but they just, this second session, we had 8 minutes of burpees.
Oh my gosh.
Minute, every minute, 45 seconds.
We have pain in my eye, Nikki, when you say that.
Yeah, 45 seconds burpees, 15 seconds rest, go again for 8 minutes for new people. So, and I was quite shocked. I refused to do it after 4 minutes, actually, because I thought I'm going to get injured. My poor brother, who'd never done a burpee in his life, nearly died. And I have to say, I saw him the next day, could hardly move the next day. And that was on top of all the other exercises we were doing. You know, we were doing deadlifts, we were doing all the push and pulls that you've mentioned, all of that sort of stuff. It was brutally hard. And I think, you know, you do have to be careful with these classes when you go along. It definitely wasn't a beginner's class, and I did feed that back to them at the end. I was like, oh gosh, I know what I'm doing, and this was quite difficult. So I think you do have to be quite careful about where you go. What would you say to people in that respect then? You know, how would you guide people to start, you know, with this being such a confusing topic? And I thought I was going to a fresh start beginners class there. And I knew as soon as I got there, it clearly wasn't. How would you direct folks?
Yep.
I mean, obviously, we have strength classes at Coach Parry.
Yeah. I think find people who, I was going to say, who you think are being scientifically correct. But again, if we want to talk around some of the influencers and all of that on Instagram, they're not always. So I would say start small. So pick some, like Nikki, I know we've used the word like exercise snacks or strength snacks almost, you know. So if they're telling you to do 8 minutes, firstly, 8 minutes of burpees, burpees don't exist in Coach Parry land. Okay, so I think they are a stupid exercise. I think you have to be extremely strong to do a burpee well, and because otherwise you just pressure on the lower back all the time and the hip flexors. And I just know for myself as a runner and my running partner anyways, if they do burpees, my hip flexors just crunch up. So okay, aside from that, so I think try try and start with things small. So if they're saying do 8 minutes, say to them, I'm really sorry, I'm going to do 3 minutes, and I know that takes a little bit of an ego thing, and people are going to be like, oh, well, no pain, no gain. And I hate that, though. I think that is the absolute thing, is that just realize that if someone is giving you strength sessions where you feel like you want to vomit afterwards, that's probably not good. A trainer worth any of their weights is never going. It's easy. It's very easy to make everyone feel like they want to vomit from exercise. But someone who has taken the sport you are doing, why you want to do these exercises, and making it specific to you, there's thought and science and reasoning that has to go into that. And we realize and we know that we don't have to hurt people and make people vomit to get stronger. In actual fact, it's the opposite. And so I think have a look at that. And of course, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the high rocks and the CrossFits, today are bad. I just think don't sacrifice technique. I think that's a key marker for yourself. So if someone is going lift more, lift faster, don't worry about the technique. That's a red flag. If someone say, do something as many as you can, in the 8 minutes, that's a red flag. The no pain, no gain thing is a red flag for me. So those would almost be the three aspects that I'd look out for. As a beginner coming in.
Do you know, but that was an interesting one. So I did stop after 4 minutes, but my brother, who's new to it totally, and I had said, and I had advised him, he was like, no, I've got to do the 8 minutes. So he did the 8 minutes. And I was like, really, David, don't. You're going to hurt yourself here. And I was quite nervous for him. But I mean, it was really hard. It was a new instructor as well. I think it's
we also sorry, Nick, you finished. Sorry. Yeah. So
no, I was just saying, I think it's very difficult to actually override the instructor, because you have a belief in the instructor and you pull. I personally, I think I would recommend people to look into a decent personal trainer and get sort of 4 to 6 sessions where they're really just taught one-to-one just how to do some of these exercises. I think it's really invaluable long term if you've never done strength, just to get that guidance from somebody in a sort of guidance technique way, rather than a sudden let's launch into heavy lifting way, which sometimes some personal trainers. So don't pick the young, newly qualified lad at the gym. Pick the older, more experienced person and just ask them for technique, because they'll realize a bit more that you can't be blasted straight away. I think is my advice anyway.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. So I think, do a bit of research as to that person's credentials as well. If they, I just think that's key. I mean, because again, in your beginner class, right, you had spoken to this person, but then it wasn't that person giving the class, right? It was a new beginner.
Well, I mean, that's it. The class was actually designed by somebody else. In fact, the whole block of 8 weeks was designed by another trainer and then delivered. He'd employed a coach to come who was newly qualified so he'd never seen his athletes, which is a bit of a warning sign. And then she had no experience of dealing with, I think she'd coached CrossFit, but to CrossFit athletes, but not beginners, because the whole idea is they have 2 months and then they phase them into the gym. So, but they're not going to phase them in if they're injured. And certainly my brother hasn't gone back. He's too scared. So, and I'm not sure if I'm going to go back. I think I might find a different way to do my strength now. But I'm a bit sad because I quite like the look of the gym and I thought it was going to be quite fun. And sometimes you do these things for community as well and the sociability, and it's nice to work out with people. And that's definitely what I've liked. But I will add in, that is the problem sometimes of when you are peri and menopausal, is that you have to know your limits quite well. Even though it's something that's really important for us, it's quite hard for us at this point to be training with men and younger folks for that very point, is that they will just push a little bit harder. They can do a little bit more, and you feel that pull to do that stuff too. And you just, and then you get a little bit sad and you don't go back because you're just like, oh, I can't do it. And then you end up not doing it. And so that's the hard thing as well there.
I love that point. And I think in perimenopause, when everything is just feeling like havoc, and That's important to be flexible. Lindsay, who was on our one podcast as our head coach and who trains a lot of females in menopause, he said his biggest lesson that he's learned with training menopausal females is the flexibility is so important. And so if there will be days when you are feeling sore and tired, and so be gentle with yourself, like you say. I think leaving the ego at the door is a big thing. Because then maybe next week you might feel stronger, better, where you can do all of these things. And again, then maybe just adjust that training so that it's not a heavy session. Then go and do yoga, go and do a Pilates, go and do something that's a little bit lighter, so just be flexible with those and yourself, and just be gentle with yourself in those moments. Don't come down too hard on yourself, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I found over time, is that there's just some days I kind of go in and I'm going, I can go through the motions, but I definitely need lighter weights. And
Yes.
it's just almost like reminding your body that it can move, but actually I can't do too much, today or that week necessarily.
Yeah, I think just aside from menopause, I mean, my training partner is pregnant at the moment, and so
Oh, right.
she's not running as much. So we're not running together at the moment. She's walking where she feels like it, and we're still doing strength though together. But exactly that. Just when she feels like she wants to lift a little bit heavier, she's not lifting superbly heavy, of course, because she's just being very careful. But there are days where she doesn't feel great, and so then we're not doing heavy heavy weights, or relatively to what she is as well. So again, if you were so gentle with yourself during pregnancy, I don't know why we can't be so gentle with ourselves during menopause either. We always seem to come down on ourselves, and it's just so interesting. And actually, in chatting to her, I know it's a little bit off topic of what we are, but it ties in with the type of exercises that we get recommended to do. So of course, a squat, and as I mentioned, there's different types of squats. And I said to her the one day, I said, Cans, you've been doing a little bit of research on what you want to do for pregnancy, and there are people, who suggest that you should do certain exercises. I said, why don't you write us a plan? I will then look at it and adjust like the sets and the reps and everything. And Nikki, I mean, she's obviously been doing some research on it, and there are different people saying you should do this exercise. It's good for the pelvic floor. This is good for this. This is good for that. They're all exercises that I would have recommended to her anyways as a female runner, and so I think this is the thing, is that you can take something and you can, move it in many different ways. It can be used for many different things. So we are still doing like Bulgarian squats as an example. We are doing deadlifts, but we just have adjusted the weights and the sets and the reps for her and for me, So I think just understand that the basics are there, and that we can adapt these things to suit us specifically depending on what phase of life we are in.
Yeah. And I think it's good that she's keeping up the routine, because
Yes.
it will be so much easier afterwards. And I think that's what we really say to the runners all the time, is just have that routine always in your program, and it will just, it might be when you're in the really heavy phase of running for a marathon or an ultra, it just has to pare back to 1 a week. But
yeah,
what are we saying, that 2 is how many sessions a week, do you think?
3. The literature shows 3. Okay, so from a scientific evidence perspective, if we want to change the loss of lean muscle mass, ideally it's 3. But
Right.
I'm a realist. I understand that we run, we have careers, we have kids, we have families, we have parents, we have all sorts. And so at Coach Parry, we were saying that 2 is better than 1 and 1 is better than none. So for me, if you can get in 1 strength session consistently for 8 weeks, it's better than doing 3 and then missing 4 weeks and then doing 2 and then missing another 2 weeks. The consistency is important. And I think that's quite key. And the research also shows, and I know this ties in, that we're saying that we must lift heavy for lean muscle mass and bone mineral density, but it does show that if you are running, so if you're doing some form of aerobic exercise, that is aerobic exercise, not necessarily just running, and you're doing some moderate resistance training, that there's still good results with your bone mineral density. Okay, so of course I think that the consistency is more important than the flashy, if I can say that, and this is my issue with the these things that are coming out on Instagram, and you must have a weighted vest, and Stacey Sims saying that you have to lift heavy. My issue with that is it sounds flashy, it sounds different to what we've never done, so maybe that's going to be the thing that's going to change this. But but really it's about the consistency, and the only way you're going to be consistent is also finding something that you enjoy doing. So
Yes.
I really am. If you don't, I love deadlifts, I love squats, I love Olympic, the Olympic
Yeah.
weightlifts. I mean, it's just I love that stuff, and so I enjoy doing it. I don't enjoy doing Pilates as an example. So find what you enjoy, make sure that it sinks into what from a health and performance perspective, and then do that and do it consistently. I think that's quite key.
Okay, and maybe just as a last question here, and I've got a view on this too, but for those ladies that kind of go, oh yeah, okay, but I really don't want to bulk up particularly. I don't want to do 3 and get kind of a little bit too bulky, What would you say to those guys? Girls?
Nikki, the I bet you if you ask how many of those ladies that they want to tone, the word tone. I want to
Yeah.
tone my body. I bet you 99% of them would say, yes, I don't want to bulk up, but I want to tone. And essentially, bulking up is an aspect of toning, right? So getting very, very bulky, which I hate that we speak about women like this in itself. I think we need to stop that as well.
Mm.
But you have to reduce body fat percentage dramatically, and you have to eat a lot and a lot and a lot of protein, and you very likely have to be training very heavy strength, to failure, hypertrophy of the muscles 4 to 5 times a week. Okay, so if you want to get really strong and you don't want to look bulky and in inverted commas, those are the aspects that we do. But females want to always tone, and toning is building muscle, right? That's what it is. But of
Yeah.
course, get to that absolute extreme of building and getting bulky, you have to really, really do like some body builder type training. So reduction of fat percentage, protein, and we already spoken about protein in our
Yep.
previous episodes around how much you really need, and so it's a lot of protein to really bulk like that. Don't be scared of bulking because we're getting stronger, and it's not bulking. It's you are toning essentially, and yeah, if you're running still, that's very unlikely that you will get to that sort of level as well. Which I
I
think
mean,
is
my tuppence worth here is the sort of same thing. But I run a track session on a Wednesday morning, and I have quite a lot of lads who come who are bulky and strong, and they run fast, because they are strong. And so don't be scared of muscle.
yeah,
You want to keep it, build it, and you will run faster and stronger, which is good. And then just for health benefits, being more muscular, having more muscle is great. Seeing my mum in old age and some of the ladies in the hospitals when I've been in to visit, and they're just so frail. And it's just something there was, my mum was fit, but she never lifted weights and stuff. And it's hard. And, just fitting it in. But I think having the muscle and the bulk isn't necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, so that's my tuppence worth on it. I see strong runners down at track, and they're running fast, and they're holding their body tall, and they're there on the last rep, still running tall, fast, and strong. So I think it's definitely a good thing to do. And
yep.
Just a tag on from that. So would you say then to sacrifice? So we're talking about sacrificing a run a week for getting in that gym a wee bit, because some folks might run 5 times a week. Then are they worth?
I'm not necessarily saying sacrifice a run. So if you are running, let's say you're running 4 times a week, you can still get in 3 strength sessions a week. You will then probably be doubling up with a run and a strength on one day. So always just check your recovery, and if you aren't recovering, then drop that 3rd strength session. Keep your 4 days of running. Make sure you're getting in 2 strength sessions. As I mentioned, I think the consistency, and again, 2 is better than 1 and 1 is better than none. If someone's running 5 times a week, I still think you're capable of getting in 2 strength sessions. But again, if you're running 5 times, if you're running 4 times a week, 5 times a week, and you're not doing strength, that's my concern. We should never be sacrificing strength for running. I actually answered a question in our forum the other day where someone said, should I be doing my cross training session on the same day as strength so that I can have a rest day? So yes, you have to have a rest day. My thing I would say is don't sacrifice strength for cross training. Your strength, strength becomes a non-negotiable now.
Yep.
So if you are running 4 times a week and you're not doing strength, that's an issue. Then I would say absolutely drop one of the runs to ensure
Right.
that you're
Okay.
getting in a strength session.
Yep.
But we're not sacrificing strength so that we can run more. And I've had clients who have improved by dropping a strength session, running 3 times a week, dropping a run session, so only running 3 times a week, doing 2 strength sessions, and taking 3 minutes off their 5K time trial. So
We all want that.
strength becomes a non-negotiable. Okay, so the 2 is better than 1, 1 is better than none. The none isn't. It's not allowed. Okay, like we
Yeah.
have to be doing this.
We have to
Yeah,
do
I
it.
absolutely think so. And again, we've spoken very briefly around exercise snacks. So start with that. Like, start with something small. I actually read an article the other day around how there's a little bit of evidence of training to failure. So if you have your 5 exercises, right, that's going to take you 20 to 30 minutes, 20 minutes to do, and do 1 set, but train it to failure. So you do, let's say you're doing squats and you're holding a kettlebell. Do 1 set of those kettlebell squats until your body doesn't feel like it can do another 1 rep, right? And so you probably, if someone's holding on average, I would say that's 15 reps on average, maybe 20 reps on, if someone is a bit stronger. And the idea there is that what's happening is that we're increasing the fatigue, so the muscles are getting tireder. So the brain goes, we need to recruit more muscles, guys. We need more muscles to help lift this weight. And so what's happening then is, as you recruit more muscle fibers, we increase our muscle mass. And so there are some studies that have shown that there's no difference between like a heavy load and a light load, or normal versus slow tempo, but around just, okay, well, let's start with these exercise snacks. Take those 5 exercises, do 1 set to failure, and there's actually a little bit of evidence that supports that. So yeah,
Perfect.
I find that.
So I'm doing every day at the moment for July. I'm doing 15 press ups in the morning.
Okay, cool.
So I should be doing those till, to be honest, I struggle with 15 if I'm honest, but I should be doing those till I absolutely can't do it anymore. I was going to up it to 20 for August, but so I should be taking it to failure then.
Yeah, do it to failure, and that is. But failure, guys, failure with good technique. Okay, so that's the key thing. So not failure. So if your push-ups, Nikki, if your bum is dropping or your bum is in the air.
Yeah, no, 15 is a push for me with a solid, strong back,
strong technique and
core.
exactly.
Yeah, so
it's the same thing with the squats. If you're doing your squats, I don't want to see your upper body lifting over. So that's why I say average training to failure would be around 10 to 15 with good technique loaded. So yeah. So I wouldn't, doing some push-ups every day, I don't have an issue with that, but I wouldn't do all 5 exercises every day necessarily. If so still break those up within how you structure your week, for sure.
No, that was just my July challenge. I thought I'll just do 15 every day, my little exercise snack. So, we walk the talk here. Okay, cool. Right. Anything else to add on to that then, Shona, before we
the last thing I want to say is, we're speaking to females over 40 who are runners. If you have nieces, daughters, young friends, this doesn't become a woman's problem over the age of 40, right? The more we can build lean muscle in our younger years, the more you can take, I call it your muscle bank. The more you can put into that bank, the more you can take out as you age. And so if you have nieces and daughters and young friends, and get them to start doing strength training now, because they'll build up that lean muscle that they can take out at a later stage. So yeah, let's start changing that narrative. I think that's really, really important. Yeah, and I think consistency always wins over flashy. I think people on Instagram are going to try and sell you things. They're going to try and say this is the next best thing. Consistency of what you enjoy and making sure that it's working for health and performance is always going to win over the flashy. But yes, I could carry on about this topic forever, Nikki. So
yes,
let's do that. Yeah.
It's long. All right, okay, and I'll just add on to that. Just fuel your sessions as well, guys. Always remember to eat around your sessions, because that's the way to build the muscle too. Right, well, that's us done for today. So if you have any comments, or you've got any favorite strength exercises you like, please do pop in the comments below. And otherwise, we will see you next week. Bye.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, everyone. Bye.